He turned down $2 million. Nobody ever knew why, until now. Rain tapped the courthouse windows like it had somewhere else to be. Evelyn Whitaker slid the papers across the marble counter without looking at me. 2 words. Sign it. The way you'd say, take out the trash. My name is Grayson Hayes, 38 years old, auto mechanic, single father of one 7-year-old named Owen. Owen still calls my old shop vacuum Gerald, insists Gerald has feelings. Once left Gerald a get well card when I replaced the filter. I did not throw the card away. I'm not sure what that says about me. I served 4 years in the military, came home, learned to fix engines, then learned, slower, harder, to raise a child alone after cancer took my wife 3 years ago. Evelyn Whitaker runs a $50 million logistics company. Corner office, Italian suits, the kind of posture that makes regular people stand up a little straighter, whether they mean to or not. We were not equals. She made sure I understood that before the ink was dry. People talked, of course. Small towns always do. Some called it noble, some called it suspicious. Nathan's uncle, red-faced at a church potluck not 3 days later, called it disgusting. A garage mechanic, marrying into that family. No one knew the real reason. No one knew about Nathan gripping my hand in that hospital room. Machines beeping their slow, terrible countdown. His voice barely above a breath. Take care of them, Gray. You're the only one I trust. And no one saw what I saw when I walked into that courthouse. A little girl, 6 years old, Harper Whitaker, standing between her mother and me, holding one of our hands in each of hers. Like she already knew her whole world depended on neither of us letting go. She was wearing her father's old military pin on her dress. I had to look away. Here is what you need to understand about Harper before this story goes any further. She was 6 years old, and she already knew how to be still in a way most adults never learn. She didn't fidget at the courthouse, didn't ask when it would be over. She just stood there between us and looked straight ahead. Those wide, serious eyes. The eyes of a child who has already learned the world can change completely without asking her permission. But here is the thing about promises made to dying men. They don't stay quiet. They follow you into the kitchen at 2 in the morning. They sit beside you on the porch when the sprinklers kick on at dusk. They wait. And 14 months after Nathan died, on a night so stormy the oak tree out back lost a whole limb, something happened in that mansion that Evelyn Whitaker, CEO, iron-willed and ice-eyed, had absolutely no answer for. Neither did I, not at first. What changed everything would take us both completely by surprise. Stay with me. This story is just getting started. In the months after Nathan died, I did what I always do when I don't know what else to do. I showed up. Not in any grand way, nothing that would get printed in one of those charity newsletters Evelyn's circle passed around at fundraising lunches. I just showed up. Brought dinner twice a week. Owen riding shotgun, still in his soccer cleats, usually with one sock missing. Fixed the leaky pipe under the kitchen sink that the housekeeper had been reporting for 3 months and nobody had gotten around to. Taught Harper how to press flowers in an old encyclopedia the way my grandmother used to do with the ones from her garden. Hydrangeas mostly. She kept that book on her nightstand like it was something precious. Evelyn tolerated me the way you tolerate a neighbor's wind chimes, present, occasionally useful, mostly something to endure. She called me Mr. Hayes for 4 months straight. Owen called her the Ice Lady, not to her face, thank the Lord, and once asked me in all sincerity whether CEOs were a different species. I told him no. I wasn't entirely sure I was right. There were nights in those early months when I sat on the edge of Owen's bed after he fell asleep and just stayed there. Not praying exactly, just staying. The way you stay near a fire when you don't know what else to do. I thought about Nathan a lot during those nights. The way he used to laugh, too loud for whatever room he was in, never apologizing for it. The way he'd call me on a Sunday morning just to tell me about something dumb he'd seen on the highway. We'd talk for 40 minutes about nothing. It was the best 40 minutes of the week. I thought about the last time I saw him laugh, 3 weeks before the accident. We were in my garage. He was helping me rebuild the carburetor, which mostly meant handing me tools and offering opinions. And he said, out of absolutely nowhere, "Gray, If anything ever happens to me, don't let Evelyn turn into a statue. She's not as cold as she looks. She's just scared. She's always been scared. She just learned to make it look like armor. I told him nothing was going to happen to him. He handed me the wrong wrench and grinned. I think about that a lot. Then month 14 arrived, and everything shifted. Nathan's family had been quiet. Too quiet. The way a field goes quiet before a bad storm rolls through. His parents, old money, older grudges, hired a team of lawyers and presented a case to family court. Fabricated, most of it. Photos of Evelyn working past midnight. A carefully assembled record suggesting neglect. Meetings Harper hadn't attended. A birthday party Evelyn had left early for an emergency board call. Child abandonment. That was the charge they were building. They wanted Harper. I knew what this was really about. Nathan had rewritten his will in his final weeks. His parents had expected control of the company. They didn't get it. And now they were reaching for the one thing that would hurt Evelyn more than any courtroom judgment ever could. One rainy Tuesday evening, the kind of rain that makes you want to check the Tupperware lids and move the photo albums off the low shelf, Evelyn đã ngồi đối diện với tôi tại bàn bếp, a glass of water she hadn't touched. The look of a woman who hadn't slept properly in 2 months. She probably hadn't. Grayson. First time she'd used my first name. Just that. A pause. Will you marry me? She said it the way someone reads a legal document aloud. Flat. Practiced. Like she'd rehearsed it 6 times in front of the bathroom mirror and decided a 7th would only make it worse. It's a contract, that's all. It gives Harper legal stability. It stops the lawsuit. It stabilizes the board. She folded her hands on the marble. Nathan trusted you. I don't entirely understand why. But I understand that he did. She looked at me then, really looked, and I could see it in her eyes. She didn't want to be asking this. It cost her something just to say the words. I thought about Owen asleep in the back seat of my truck, head tilted against the window. I thought about Nathan's voice. Take care of them, Gray. And I thought about Harper, sitting on the kitchen floor the week before, pressing another hydrangea into page 312 of that old encyclopedia, working with the careful concentration of someone who has already learned that beautiful things need to be held gently, or they fall apart. I nodded. The wedding was cold. A law office, not a church, no flowers. Harper wore her best dress and stood between us and held both our hands and smiled, completely unaware of every broken thing around her. But there was something I didn't know yet, something Nathan's family had already put in motion, an offer made to me in secret 2 weeks before that courthouse day. Something Evelyn was about to discover, and when she found out, nothing between us would ever be the same. Harper's panic attacks came without warning. That's the cruelest part of grief in a child. It doesn't announce itself, doesn't give you time to set down your coffee cup and prepare. One moment she was asleep, the next she was screaming in a way that made the whole house go still. Month 15. The storm that night was the kind that rattles old window frames and makes dogs nervous. Owen was at my parents' place for the weekend. The housekeeper had gone home, just Evelyn, Harper, and me in that enormous house. The kind of house that somehow always felt emptier the more expensive the furniture got. I was in the garage, fixing a neighbor's riding mower, a thing I'd offered to do 6 weeks prior and kept not getting around to, when I heard her, "Daddy, Daddy, Daddy!" I was through the side door before I knew I'd moved. Evelyn was already in Harper's room, standing in the doorway, both hands pressed flat against the frame. The posture of a person who desperately wants to help and has suddenly discovered she doesn't know how. Harper was curled against the headboard, arms wrapped around a worn teddy bear with one button eye missing. Nathan's bear. Harper hadn't let it out of her sight in 15 months. Evelyn took a step forward. Harper pulled away. It wasn't cruelty. It wasn't even rejection. Not really. It was just a 6-year-old's grief. Raw and directionless and enormous. Landing in the only place grief ever lands, wherever the wound already is. Evelyn stepped back. Her face didn't break, but something behind her eyes did. I saw it, the way you see a crack form in old china. Silent, clean, irreversible. Something passed across her face that I don't think she knew was visible. It wasn't frustration. It wasn't even hurt exactly. It was the look of a woman who had spent 15 months holding everything together. The company, the grief, the legal battle, the pretending, and had just discovered that the one thing she most wanted to do, comfort her own daughter, was the one thing she could not make herself do right. She had the wrong tool for this particular job, and she knew it. I thought about what Nathan said in the garage. She's not as cold as she looks. She's just scared.
I stepped past her, gently, and sat down on the floor. Not on the bed, not next to Harper, just on the floor, below her eye level. The way you sit with a scared animal you don't want to startle. And I started talking. Not about anything important. I told her about the time her daddy and I were 16 and tried to fix his father's Ford pickup without permission. We got the engine back together with 2 bolts left over. We stared at those bolts for a solid 10 minutes debating whether they were optional. I told her about the lullaby Nathan's grandmother used to sing, an old one, the kind that doesn't rhyme perfectly, somehow that makes it better. I could feel Evelyn still in the doorway behind me. She hadn't moved. I hummed it soft, softer still. Harper's hand reached out in the dark and found my sleeve. Just the sleeve. She didn't pull on it. Just held it the way you hold a railing on an unfamiliar staircase. Not because you're falling, but because it helps to know something solid is there. I kept humming. Harper's breathing slowed. Her grip on the bear loosened, just slightly. By the time she was asleep, her head had found its way to my shoulder. I didn't move. I sat there on the floor in the dark while the storm moved east and the house went quiet. I looked up and found Evelyn standing in the doorway, watching. She didn't say anything. Neither did I. But it was the first time she looked at me, not through me. The next morning, Evelyn made breakfast. Not in the calling the housekeeper sense. She actually stood at the stove. A little uncertain, consulting her phone twice. Scrambled eggs and toast. The toast came out slightly overdone. She stood at the counter and stared at it for a moment, like she was deciding whether to report it to someone. Harper came downstairs still carrying the teddy bear, climbed up on the kitchen stool, looked at the toast. "It's a little dark," Harper said. "I know," said Evelyn. "Daddy used to burn toast too." Harper's voice was matter-of-fact, soft. He said it was extra crispy. Evelyn looked at her daughter for a long moment. Her throat moved. Then she put the plate down in front of Harper and said, very quietly, "Extra crispy it is." Harper ate every bite. I watched from the doorway with my coffee. Did not say a single word. Because some moments are too important to narrate. The next morning arrived with no grace whatsoever. Evelyn's phone started ringing at 6:15. Then again. Then again. By the 4th call, I was already up making coffee. The old percolator kind. The kind that sounds like it has opinions. A fleet of 18 transport trucks had failed inspection overnight. Faulty hydraulic lines. 6 delivery contracts in jeopardy. The deadline was 6 hours away. Her logistics team had been on it since 3 in the morning. 20 engineers. No solution. She appeared in the kitchen doorway. For the first time since I'd known her, genuinely frightened. "Can you—" She stopped, started again. "Would you be willing to look at them?" I set down the coffee, put on my jacket, didn't wait to be asked twice. That's not a virtue, that's just how my father raised me. What I found in that warehouse wasn't complicated. A cascading seal failure, a common pattern in high-mileage hydraulic systems running in cold overnight temperatures. The kind of thing you learn to recognize if you've spent enough years underneath enough trucks. The military taught me systems. The garage taught me patience. Between the two, I had 4 of the 6 trucks running within 3 hours. The remaining 2 took 40 minutes more. The contracts were met, every one of them. Evelyn found me in the warehouse parking lot, washing my hands with a gas station paper towel that was losing the battle considerably. She stood there a moment. Her voice, when it came, was quieter than I'd ever heard it. "How did you know?" I almost said experience, but then I thought about Nathan. The way he used to brag, genuinely brag, the way men brag about their kids, about every person he trusted. So I told her the truth. Nathan told me once, years ago,
that if your fleet ever gave you trouble, I was the man to call. I tucked the paper towel in my pocket, said it like he'd already planned ahead. She froze. Her hand came up slowly and pressed against her sternum. That involuntary gesture people make when something hits them right where Nathan used to be. The ice had not melted. Not yet. But for the first time, there was water at the edges. But what Evelyn was about to discover, about what Nathan's family had offered me before the wedding, and what I had quietly done with my own savings instead, would crack those walls all the way through, and nothing would ever be the same between us. Month 16 started quietly. Owen lost a tooth and immediately began negotiating the going tooth fairy rate with the focused energy of a small claims attorney. Harper taught him the flower pressing technique. They spent an entire Saturday afternoon crouched over page 312 of that encyclopedia. Shoulders touching, completely absorbed. The sprinklers ran in the backyard. The late afternoon light came in gold through the kitchen window. I stood at the sink and watched them. Nathan would have loved this so much. It was a Thursday when Evelyn found the letter. She didn't come to me right away. She sat with it. 2 full hours at her office desk, I learned later, before she came home at 6:30. Set her bag down at the door. Stood in the kitchen until I looked up from the pot of chicken soup I was making. Owen's request. He'd had a cough for 3 days and was managing it with the drama of a man twice his age. She held out an envelope. Inside was a letter from Nathan's family attorney, dated 3 weeks before our courthouse wedding. An offer. $2 million deposited to any account I named, contingent on one condition, that I withdraw from the marriage agreement and disappear from Evelyn and Harper's lives entirely. I remember the exact moment I had read that letter the first time, alone at my kitchen table. 11:30 at night, Owen asleep down the hall, a cup of coffee going cold beside my elbow. I read it twice. Then I folded it back up, put it in the drawer under the takeout menus, sat there for a while in the quiet. $2 million is not an abstract number when you're a single mechanic with a mortgage and a kid who's about to need braces. I thought about Harper pressing flowers into that encyclopedia. I thought about Owen's face the first time she'd laughed at one of his jokes. His complete shining disbelief that someone had found him genuinely funny. I thought about Nathan in that hospital bed. The way his grip had felt on my hand. Weaker than I expected, but certain. I put the letter in the trash on my way to bed. Now Evelyn watched my face while I read it again. "You didn't take it," she said. Not a question. "No." "Why?" I put the letter down on the counter beside the soup pot. Thought about how to answer that in a way that wasn't going to sound like a speech. I've never been good at speeches. I'm better with socket wrenches. "Because Harper needed medical care she wasn't getting," I said. "The pediatric anxiety specialist. Her regular doctor had referred her twice, and nobody had followed up on it." I paused. I used what I had in savings, covered 3 months up front so there'd be no gap. Evelyn went very still. "You used your—" She stopped. Her voice had done something I'd never heard it do before. It cracked, right down the middle, clean as that china. "It wasn't a sacrifice," I said, which was not entirely accurate, but also not entirely a lie. It was just the next right thing. She turned away, put both hands flat on the counter, stood there like someone who has just walked a long distance and finally, unexpectedly, reached somewhere solid. 2 days later, she called me into Nathan's old study. She was holding a small USB drive. Black, unremarkable. The kind of thing you'd find in a junk drawer beside dead batteries and expired coupons. "His attorney sent this when he passed," she said. There was a note with it. It said, "Do not open until 18 months." She looked at me. "It's been 18 months." She pressed play. The video was filmed on a phone. Nathan in a hospital chair, thinner than I'd last seen him, which I hadn't thought possible. But his eyes were the same, steady, a little amused, the way they always were, like he'd thought the whole situation through and arrived at a conclusion he found genuinely interesting. He looked directly into the camera. "Brother," he said, "I know what's coming. You probably do too by now." A pause. "Evelyn is strong, stronger than she lets herself be, which is its own problem. Harper needs someone who'll sit on the floor in the dark and not make it about himself. I thought about every man I know, and I kept coming back to you. I don't know if you'll do what I'm hoping you'll do, but I think you will.
Because that's who you are. He looked down for just a moment, then back up. Love them for me, Gray, with everything you've got. The quiet way you do things, that's not a small thing. It never was. That's the whole thing. Static. Then nothing. Evelyn didn't try to hold it together. She cried the way people cry when grief finally finds the door you didn't know you'd been keeping locked. Hard and complete and without apology. I let her. Didn't offer a paper towel or a speech, just stayed. Eventually, she leaned against my shoulder, the way Harper had that stormy night. Quiet, trusting, like she'd decided somewhere in the last 60 seconds that this was a place she could be tired in. At the board meeting the following week, one of the senior partners, the kind of man who keeps a golf trophy on his desk where other people keep family photos, made a comment. Something about optics, something about what it looked like, a CEO aligning herself so publicly with a mechanic from the East Side. Evelyn stood up. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. The man you're describing, she said, covered my daughter's medical bills out of his own pocket, turned down $2 million to walk away from us, saved 6 delivery contracts in a single morning, and sat on a 6-year-old's bedroom floor in the dark until she stopped being afraid. She looked around the table, calmly. He is not a liability to this company. He is the standard I intend to hold this company to. The room was quiet. The CEO Marries mechanic story had been gossip for months, but the version that got out next, the real one, was something different entirely. And what Evelyn was about to confess to me one quiet evening after the children were asleep was something she had never said out loud to anyone. It was a Wednesday evening in late autumn, the kind of evening that comes in the middle of an ordinary week and becomes, without announcement, the one you remember for the rest of your life. The children were asleep. The house was quiet in that warm, settled way it had started to feel. Less like a showroom, more like a home. Something simmering in the slow cooker, Owen's soccer cleats by the back door, Harper's encyclopedia open on the coffee table to a page of pressed goldenrod. Evelyn came and found me on the back porch. I was in the old rocker, one of those heavy wooden ones that had come with the house and creaked the same note every time. Reliable as a clock. I'd gotten used to it. She stood at the door a moment, then came and sat on the porch step just below me, wrapped in an oversized cardigan that I'm fairly certain had belonged to Nathan once. She looked out at the yard for a while, then she said quietly, "I was so lonely, Grayson." Just that. No preamble, no corporate structure. After Nathan died, I just became the work. I thought if I kept moving fast enough, the grief couldn't catch up. She pulled the cardigan tighter. It caught up anyway. It always does. I didn't say anything. The rocker creaked. "I underestimated you," she said. "From the first day. I saw the coveralls in the truck, and I made up my mind before I looked." She paused. "I've been looking ever since, and I just keep seeing more." I had kept my own confession a long time. "I've admired you for years," I told her. "Since before any of this. Nathan used to talk about you the way people talk about the sun, like you were something to orient yourself by." I stopped, laughed a little, quietly. I never thought I had any business saying that out loud. She turned and looked at me. "Say it again," she said. So I did. She was quiet for a long moment after. The rocker creaked. A moth found the porch light and bumped against it, patient and undeterred. Down the hall, I could hear Owen talking in his sleep, probably negotiating something. He was always negotiating something, then going quiet again. "I don't know how to do this," Evelyn said. Not the CEO voice, the other one. "I know how to run a company. I know how to read a contract and win a board vote and hold it together in front of people who are waiting for me to fall apart." She looked at her hands. "I don't know how to just be someone's." "Nobody does," I said. "You just decide to try."
She looked at me sideways, just slightly suspicious, the way she looks at anything that sounds simpler than she expected.
That's it? That's the whole thing?
She learned to change the oil in a car the following Saturday morning. I didn't suggest it, she asked. Showed up in the garage in old jeans and a flannel shirt with her hair pulled back, looking like she was approaching something she intended to master by noon. Owen supervised with great seriousness. Harper handed her tools with the ceremonial gravity of a surgical assistant. When the oil ran dark and clean into the catchpan, she stood up and looked at her hands, smudged with grease, and laughed. Really laughed. The kind that surprises the person doing it. I always thought this world was beneath mine, she said. Not unkindly, more like a woman reading an old letter she'd written when she was younger and less wise. But it's the one that taught me everything that actually matters.
Turn into the time the scariest things out of blinks me ever spacek. Some pounds that best memories are nabling with these verkesters.
That night at dinner, Owen going on about Gerald the vacuum, and Harper carefully explaining the Latin name for goldenrod, which she had looked up and taken extremely seriously. Evelyn reached over and took my hand. Across the table, Owen looked at Harper. Harper looked at Owen. Then, in one of those moments you don't plan and can't choreograph and will think about for the rest of your days, Owen said, "Mom, can you pass the rolls?" And Harper said, at the exact same moment, "Dad, can I have more soup?" The whole table stopped. Two children who had each lost something enormous, each one, quietly and without announcement, deciding to fill the space with something new. Owen recovered first. He picked up the basket of rolls, store-bought because it was a Tuesday and I hadn't planned ahead, and passed them to Evelyn with great ceremony.
"You're mom now," he said, with the settled confidence of someone who has thought it over thoroughly and reached a conclusion. I decided. Harper looked at me with those serious dark eyes and said, simply, "You were already Dad. I just didn't say it yet." I had to look down at my soup bowl for a moment, not from sadness, from something that doesn't have a name, that feeling that arrives when something broken has finished healing and you realize you almost missed noticing the exact moment it happened. Evelyn's hand found mine under the table. She squeezed once, I squeezed back. The rolls were a little stale, the soup was a little salty, the overhead light in the kitchen had been flickering for a week and I kept forgetting to change the bulb. It was the best dinner I have ever sat down to. But the most extraordinary thing hadn't happened yet. 6 months on, month 18, something occurred on a perfectly ordinary picnic afternoon that neither of us saw coming. And it would be the moment that made everything, the grief, the loss, the cold courthouse morning, every hard quiet day in between, feel, finally, like it had been worth it. Month 18 arrived on a Saturday that couldn't have known how important it was going to be. Evelyn showed up to the picnic in a t-shirt. No blazer, no heels. Just a soft blue t-shirt and grass-stained sneakers she'd borrowed from the housekeeper and hadn't returned. She brought deviled eggs. Made them herself from an old church potluck recipe she'd found in the back of a kitchen drawer. Written in someone's grandmother's handwriting on a card with a coffee ring on the corner. They weren't perfect. Owen ate 4 of them without a single complaint. I considered that a minor miracle. I spread a blanket under the old oak, the one that had lost a limb in that storm back in month 15, but growing in just fine around the absence. I brought out a box of small toy cars, the kind with tiny hoods that actually open. My own father had given them to me when I was Harper's age. She and Owen crouched over them with complete absorption. Evelyn and I sat nearby, close enough that our shoulders touched. I showed them how the steering linkage worked. Harper wanted to understand every part. Owen wanted to see how fast they could go down the blanket's incline. Both things, I told them, were equally valid. Surgery, maybe. Or architecture. Or the kind of engineering that makes sure bridges don't fall down. She asked 4 questions in a row, each one building on the last, not waiting for me to finish answering before the next one arrived. Owen watched her do this, then looked at me with an expression I recognized. The expression of someone who has recently acquired a sibling and is still updating his understanding of what that means. "She's smarter than me," he said. Matter of fact, no complaint in it. "Different kind of smart," I said. He considered this. "I'm faster, though." "You are definitely faster."
He seemed satisfied with that division of labor, went back to the incline experiment with renewed focus. Evelyn watched them for a long time.
Then she said, in that quiet voice she'd found in the last 6 months, the one underneath the CEO voice, the real one.
"I've been thinking about the people at the company." I waited. "Some of them are struggling, really struggling, and I've been so focused on the numbers that I didn't—" She pressed her lips together. "I want to raise the floor for the lowest paid staff and create some kind of fund for people dealing with what I was dealing with, what you were dealing with, family emergencies, childcare, medical costs." She looked at me. "I know it sounds exactly right," I said. She had spent years building walls and had finally decided to use the same materials to build something better. People still ask us how we ended up here. They arrive expecting scandal, the CEO and the mechanic, the mansion and the garage. All that contrast they can't stop poking at. But the real story is quieter than that and simpler. Sometimes love begins with loss, with a deathbed promise, with two people who are both, in their own ways, quietly broken. Finding out that broken things, held with care, have a way of mending stronger than they were before. Evelyn no longer sees the distance between her world and mine. She sees, her words, said to me once over coffee on the porch while the sprinklers ran, the man who taught me that the only wealth worth having is the kind you give away. And I learned something too. I learned that kindness is not a small thing. It never was. Nathan knew it. He'd been banking on it all along. He wasn't wrong. If this story found you somewhere you needed it, leave a comment below. Just 3 words. Kindness changes everything. Because sometimes the family you never planned for turns out to be the one you were always meant to have. And it all begins with one person deciding to simply show up. There's a photograph on our refrigerator now. It wasn't taken by a professional. Nobody arranged the lighting or told anyone where to stand. Owen took it, or tried to, with my old Polaroid camera he'd found in the hall closet, and declared the greatest technological achievement he'd ever encountered. Not the greeting card version. The kind that gets stitched on pillows and forgotten. The real kind. The kind that costs you something. The kind that means showing up with a casserole on a Tuesday when nobody asked you to. The kind that means sitting on a 6-year-old's bedroom floor in the dark and telling stories. Not because anyone will ever know, but because it's the next right thing. The kind that means turning down $2 million because a little girl needs a father more than you need the money. That kind. The kind my own mother practiced every day of her life without ever calling it anything at all. She never said, "I'm being kind." She just left the porch light on for whoever might need it. She just saved the last piece of pie for the person who looked like they'd had a hard week. She just picked up the phone at 10 in the evening without complaint, because someone on the other end needed to hear a voice they trusted. I didn't understand when I was young that this was a form of courage. I understand now. Owen asked me once. We were driving home from school, stopped at a red light, completely out of nowhere, the way 7-year-olds do. "Dad, is kindness the same as being nice?" I thought about it. "Being nice is how you act," I said. "Kindness is what you decide when nobody's watching." He was quiet for a moment. Then, "Like when you fixed Mrs. Patterson's screen door and didn't tell her it was you?" "Something like that." He nodded slowly, the way he nods when he's filing something away for later. "Okay," he said. "I'm gonna be kind then." I kept my eyes on the road. The light turned green. "Yeah," I said. "Me too." If you're watching this today, maybe on a Thursday afternoon in the recliner, maybe while something quiet plays in the other room, maybe because someone in your family sent you this and said you need to watch this, Mom, I hope this story felt true. Not because the names are real, but because the feeling is. Because most of us have sat at a table with an empty chair. Most of us have made a promise we weren't entirely sure we could keep. Most of us have underestimated someone, or been underestimated ourselves, and had to decide what to do with that. Most of us have been both Grayson and Evelyn, the quiet giver and the person who hadn't yet learned to receive. Evelyn keeps the USB drive in the top drawer of her nightstand. Harper still presses flowers into that encyclopedia. She's moved on from goldenrod.
Mountain Laurel now. Owen has decided that Gerald the vacuum deserves a full retirement and has named the new one something I cannot repeat in polite company. The porch rocker still creaks the same note, and every evening at the dinner table, two kids who came from different kinds of loss sit beside each other and are, quietly, completely, a family. This story reminds us of something we already know, but keep forgetting to do. Grayson didn't fix Evelyn's world with a speech. He fixed a leaky pipe. He sat on a floor in the dark. He showed up on a Tuesday with soup nobody asked for. So here's what that looks like in a real life. Yours. This week, pull out the little notebook from the junk drawer, the one still sitting there next to the dead batteries and expired coupons, and write down the name of one person who has quietly shown up for you. Not a text, a real phone call, before noon, while the coffee's still hot. Tell them exactly one specific thing they did that you never forgot. And on Sunday morning, before anyone else is up, set his favorite mug on the counter next to yours. Not to grieve, just to remember that love doesn't require a living person to still be present in a room. That's not a small thing. That is the thing. Kindness changes everything. And if you know someone who could use a reminder that second chances are real, that love can find its way even through grief and distance and a cold courthouse morning, share this with them today. This story was written by a human, supported by AI. It doesn't aim to change the whole world, just one small corner of your heart. To help you believe that amid all the hardship, there is still room for kindness, for unconditional goodness, and for the most beautiful things quietly existing, waiting for us to notice them.